Tommy Lee Jones utterly hated Jim Carrey. Now we know the reason why, and what happened on that Batman set still sends shockwaves through Hollywood today, revealing a clash so epic that it nearly destroyed a $250 million franchise. Picture this: two of Hollywood's biggest stars, locked in a billion-dollar blockbuster, and one of them allegedly told the other, "I cannot sanction your buffoonery." But that ice-cold put-down was just the appetizer in what insiders call the most jaw-dropping personality clash in superhero movie history. We're talking about Tommy Lee Jones, the man who could intimidate a grizzly bear with a glance, going head-to-head with Jim Carrey, the rubber-faced comedy king who was riding the highest wave of his career like a manic tsunami. What started as professional tension reportedly exploded into something far more personal. Something that would haunt both men for decades and change how Hollywood thinks about casting incompatible stars. But here's what the tabloids never told you. This wasn't just about clashing egos or prima donna behavior. This was about two fundamentally different philosophies of acting, two opposing views of what it means to be a serious artist in Hollywood's ruthless ecosystem. And when those worlds collided on the set of Batman Forever in 1995, the resulting fireworks were anything but fictional. They were nuclear. Think you know how deep this rabbit hole goes? Think again. We've got studio executives panicking, crew members choosing sides, and a director caught in the middle of what became an all-out war for the soul of blockbuster filmmaking. Who was really right in this legendary feud? And what does it reveal about the dark side of Hollywood stardom where artistic integrity battles commercial success every single day? Stick around, because we're about to pull back the curtain on one of Tinseltown's most explosive behind-the-scenes battles, complete with never-before-revealed details that'll make your jaw drop. And hey, if you love these deep dives into Hollywood's hidden dramas, maybe consider hitting that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. We've got another earth-shattering celebrity feud lined up that makes this one look like a polite disagreement. Who was Tommy Lee Jones? To understand why Tommy Lee Jones allegedly despised Jim Carrey with the intensity of a Texas thunderstorm meeting a California wildfire, you need to understand the man himself, a walking contradiction wrapped in cowboy boots and Ivy League credentials, forged in the crucible of American ambition. Thomas Lee Jones was born September 15, 1946, in San Saba, Texas, a dusty town where tumbleweeds outnumbered opportunities and dreams came with calluses. His father, Clyde C. Jones, worked the oil fields with hands harder than the Texas hardpan, while his mother, Lucille Marie, juggled roles as a police officer, school teacher, and beauty shop owner. Talk about wearing multiple hats in a town where everyone had to fight for survival. Young Tommy learned early that life was about discipline, respect, and earning every damn thing you got through blood, sweat, and relentless determination. This wasn't some Hollywood fairy tale. This was pure American grit, the kind that builds character one painful lesson at a time. But here's where the story gets fascinating. This future Hollywood hardman wasn't just tough, he was brilliant. Scary brilliant. The kind of kid who could quote Shakespeare while breaking horses, discuss philosophy while fixing fences, and intimidate grown men with nothing but his piercing intellect and those laser-focused eyes that seem to see straight through to your soul. Picture this scrawny Texas teenager with an IQ that could power a small city, growing up in a world where being smart could get you labeled as different, and not in a good way. But Tommy Lee Jones didn't just survive being different, he weaponized it, turning his intellectual gifts into armor that nobody could penetrate. At 16, Tommy's raw intelligence earned him a scholarship to the prestigious St. Mark's School of Texas, where he first discovered acting and everything changed forever. Suddenly, this rough-around-the-edges cowboy was thrust into the refined world of elite education, surrounded by old money and older traditions. The contrast was stark, like dropping a wolf into a poodle show, and it would shape everything about the man he'd become. Here's what most people don't know about those formative years. Jones didn't just adapt to his new environment, he conquered it with the systematic precision of a military campaign. He studied his classmates like specimens, learning to mimic their speech patterns, their mannerisms, their casual confidence that came from never having to wonder where the next meal was coming from. But underneath that carefully constructed facade, the Texas fire still burned white hot. Classmates reportedly described him as intimidating even then. The kind of guy who made you want to study harder just by walking into the room, who could silence an entire dormitory with a single glance. Then came Harvard. Not exactly where you'd expect a cowboy to land, right? But Tommy Lee Jones didn't just attend Harvard. He conquered it like Sherman marching through Georgia. English literature major, cum laude graduate, and roommate to a young man named Al Gore, who'd later become vice president. Jones was already showing that razor-sharp intensity that would become his trademark, whether he was dissecting Shakespearean sonnets or perfecting his craft in Harvard's elite theater program. His college years were marked by an almost obsessive dedication to excellence that bordered on the frightening. Fellow students reportedly described him as the kind of person who made straight A's look effortless, while everyone else was drowning in assignments. He played football with the same intensity he brought to everything else, acted in plays like his life depended on it, and maintained grades that would make most students weep with envy and terror. But beneath that academic success was a young man wrestling with fundamental questions about identity, authenticity, and what it meant to be a Texas boy in an Ivy League world. Friends from that era remember him as fiercely private, quick to anger when he felt disrespected, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting what he considered important. After graduation in 1969, reality hit harder than a freight train loaded with broken dreams. This was Vietnam-era America, and Jones faced a choice that would define his character: serve his country in a war he wasn't sure he believed in, or find another path that honored both his principles and his ambitions. He chose Broadway, or rather, Broadway chose him when he landed a role in A Patriot for Me in 1969. But calling it a choice makes it sound easier than it was. This was a gamble of epic proportions, a Harvard graduate with a guaranteed future throwing it all away to chase the impossible dream of acting success in the most unforgiving city in America. The transition from Harvard intellectual to struggling actor was brutal beyond description. Jones lived in a tiny New York apartment that made prison cells look spacious, surviving on dreams, determination, and whatever day jobs he could scrape together. He waited tables with the same intensity he'd brought to Shakespeare, took whatever work he could find, and slowly, painfully, built his craft one audition at a time. This wasn't some Hollywood pretty boy coasting on charm and connections. This was a warrior earning his stripes in the trenches of American theater, where talent without toughness gets eaten alive before lunch. Every rejection was a lesson, every small success a victory earned through relentless preparation and absolute commitment to excellence. His breakthrough came with The Eyes of Laura Mars in 1978, but it was his portrayal of Loretta Lynn's husband in Coal Miner's Daughter that really announced his arrival as a force to be reckoned with. Jones didn't just play Doolittle Lynn, he became him, disappearing so completely into the role that audiences forgot they were watching an actor and believed they were seeing a piece of authentic American history come to life. And that, right there, was the Tommy Lee Jones method. Total commitment, absolute authenticity, no shortcuts, no compromises. If you were going to share the screen with him, you better bring your A game, because anything less was an insult to the craft he'd spent his life perfecting. The 1980s saw Jones evolve into Hollywood's go-to guy for complex, morally ambiguous characters who existed in the gray areas between heroism and villainy. The River Rat, The Package, JFK. Each role was a masterclass in controlled intensity, a demonstration of what happened when raw talent met rigorous preparation and fierce intelligence. Directors loved working with him because he came prepared like a man going to war. He knew his lines backwards and forwards, understood his character's psychology better than a trained psychiatrist, and brought a gravity to every scene that you simply couldn't fake or teach. But that preparation came with a price that not everyone was willing to pay. Colleagues began describing Jones as demanding, perfectionist, sometimes difficult to work with. He had no patience for unprepared actors, no tolerance for what he considered unprofessional behavior, and absolutely zero interest in coddling fragile egos or hurt feelings. If you showed up to set without knowing your lines, without understanding your character, without respecting the sacred responsibility of bringing fiction to life, Tommy Lee Jones would eat you alive. Politely, professionally, but completely. His personal life reflected the same intensity that defined his career. 3 marriages, each representing different phases of his evolution from struggling actor to Hollywood heavyweight. His first wife, Kate Lardner, was a writer, an intellectual match for his Harvard-trained mind and a woman who could keep up with his rapid-fire intelligence. The second, Kimberly Cloughley, gave him 2 children but couldn't handle the pressures of Hollywood life and the relentless demands of being married to a man who treated everything like a military campaign. By the time he married his third wife, Dawn Laurel, in 2001, Jones had learned to balance his ferocious professional standards with genuine personal warmth. But even then, friends described him as a man who never truly relaxed, never stopped analyzing, never let his guard down completely. Then came the role that would define the next phase of his career and establish him as one of Hollywood's most bankable action stars, Deputy U.S. Marshal Samuel Gerard in The Fugitive. This wasn't just acting. This was Tommy Lee Jones channeling every ounce of his Texas lawman heritage, his Harvard intellect, and his Broadway training into a character that felt real because, in many ways, it was real. The film's success was staggering beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Suddenly, Hollywood's most intense character actor was a box office draw, an action star with the acting chops to match his newfound commercial appeal. The Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor was just the cherry on top of what had become a remarkable career transformation from struggling theater actor to A-list movie star. But here's what most people don't understand about Tommy Lee Jones. Beneath that steel exterior and intimidating presence beat the heart of a true artist. He wasn't just an actor collecting paychecks. He was a student of human nature, a man who approached every role like a research project, diving deep into the psychology of his characters until he understood them better than they understood themselves. This methodical approach to craft wasn't just professional, it was personal. Acting, to Jones, represented the perfect marriage of his intellectual gifts and his emotional truth. Every character was a puzzle to be solved, a psychology to be explored, a piece of humanity to be understood and presented with absolute honesty. By 1995, he'd spent over 2 decades perfecting this approach, building a reputation as one of Hollywood's most respected actors. He was known for his preparation, his professionalism, and his absolute intolerance for anything that smacked of Hollywood phoniness or disrespect for the craft. And then Joel Schumacher called with an offer that would test every principle Tommy Lee Jones held dear, playing Two-Face in Batman Forever, opposite a rubber-faced comedian who was about to turn his carefully ordered world upside down and challenge everything he believed about serious acting. You see, Jones wasn't just particular about his craft. He was protective of it like a parent protecting a child. Acting to him wasn't entertainment or escapism. It was art in its purest form. It wasn't about getting laughs or making faces or mugging for the camera. It was about truth, authenticity, the sacred responsibility of bringing fictional characters to life with dignity and respect for the audience's intelligence. Can you imagine what was going through his mind when he first heard about his co-star? Here was a man who'd spent his entire career building a reputation for serious, thoughtful performances, suddenly asked to share the screen with Hollywood's biggest goofball, A man whose idea of character development involved making his face look like silly putty? The stage was set for an epic collision between two fundamentally different approaches to the craft they both claimed to love. And when those worlds finally met on a Gotham City soundstage, the resulting explosion would create ripples that Hollywood still feels today. But the real fireworks were just beginning. Stay with me, because what happened next would change everything and reveal just how deep this philosophical divide really went. But beneath that weathered exterior and Oscar-winning smile, one name would soon be etched in acid across his soul: Jim Carrey. Incident number 1, the first meeting. Warner Brothers Studios, late 1994. The air was thick with anticipation and the kind of nervous energy that only comes with $250 million movie productions. Joel Schumacher had assembled his cast for the first table read of Batman Forever, and the atmosphere was electric with the possibility of either spectacular success or catastrophic failure. Tommy Lee Jones arrived precisely 15 minutes early, because of course he did, carrying his meticulously annotated script that looked like a doctoral thesis, complete with character notes, psychological breakdowns, and margin scribbles that would have impressed his Harvard professors. He wore the expression of a man ready for serious business, the kind of focused intensity that had made him Hollywood's go-to guy for complex characters. Then Jim Carrey bounded in like a human tornado. Picture this: the biggest comedy star in the world, fresh off back-to-back monster hits with The Mask and Dumb and Dumber, practically vibrating with manic energy that seemed to electrify the very air around him. He wasn't just Jim Carrey entering the room. He was already halfway into his Riddler character, speaking in riddles, making faces at invisible cameras, and treating the entire table red like his personal comedy showcase. But here's what makes this moment even more jaw-dropping. Carrey had reportedly been up all night studying the character, diving deep into the psychology of Edward Nygma with the same intensity Jones brought to his roles. The difference was in the expression. Where Jones channeled his preparation into controlled focus, Carrey exploded with it like a firework factory. Jones reportedly watched this display with the expression of a man witnessing a desecration of something sacred. Imagine a classical musician forced to watch someone play Beethoven with a kazoo. That's the level of artistic offense we're talking about here. According to witnesses, when Carrey attempted to break the ice with his signature physical comedy routine, complete with sound effects and exaggerated facial expressions, Jones simply stared at him with those laser-focused eyes and said, "Mr. Carrey, are you quite finished?" The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees, and Jim Carrey's million-dollar smile flickered for just a moment like a candle in a hurricane. But instead of backing down, Carrey doubled down, launching into what witnesses described as an even more elaborate routine, as if he thought Jones just hadn't understood the brilliance of his approach. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on the other side of the studio lot. Incident number 2. The method and the madness. 3 weeks into filming, the fundamental philosophical divide between these two titans exploded into open conflict that had crew members choosing sides like it was the Civil War all over again. Jones, preparing for his Two-Face scenes, had spent hours in makeup and wardrobe, getting into character through careful, methodical preparation that looked like a religious ritual. This was serious business to him. Bringing Harvey Dent's psychological split to life required focus, concentration, and respect for the character's tragic nature. Two-Face wasn't just a villain, he was a representation of humanity's dual nature, the constant battle between order and chaos, good and evil. Jones had spent weeks researching multiple personality disorders, studying real-life cases, and building a performance that honored the complexity of the character. Then Carrey showed up to set still fully immersed in his Riddler persona, spouting questions faster than a machine gun, doing impromptu acrobatics that defied physics, and treating the Batman universe like his personal playground where anything was possible. To make matters worse, He'd allegedly been staying in character between takes, driving the crew crazy with his relentless riddles and physical comedy bits that never stopped coming. Picture this. Jones is trying to get into the headspace of a man whose mind has been shattered by tragedy, while 20 feet away, Carrey is bouncing off the walls like a green-clad ping-pong ball, making joke after joke after joke. It was like trying to perform Shakespeare while someone played death metal at full volume. When Jones finally snapped, it was quietly devastating in the way that only true professionals can deliver career-ending insults. A crew member reportedly overheard him telling Carrey, "I cannot sanction your buffoonery. This is supposed to be a serious film about serious characters, and you're turning it into a three-ring circus with yourself as the only act." But Carrey, either completely oblivious to the insult or determined to win Jones over through sheer force of personality, responded with an even more elaborate comedy routine, complete with sound effects, exaggerated facial expressions, and what witnesses described as physically impossible contortions. The silence that followed was deafening. Tommy Lee Jones simply stared for what felt like an eternity, then walked away without another word. They didn't speak for the rest of that day, or the next, or the day after that. Incident number 3. The craft services confrontation. The breaking point came during what should have been a routine lunch break, proving that in Hollywood, even eating can become a battleground when egos collide. Craft services on movie sets are usually neutral territory, a DMZ where everyone from A-list stars to grip assistants can grab a sandwich, decompress, and pretend they're all just people doing a job. But when you put a meticulous perfectionist in the same space as a hyperactive improviser who treats every moment like a potential stage, even lunch can become the Alamo. Carrey, still riding high on his box office success and the natural high of being the biggest comedy star on the planet, was holding court near the catering table like a medieval king entertaining his subjects. He was regaling a group of crew members with impressions and physical comedy that had them laughing so hard they couldn't eat. His energy was infectious, stress was melting away, people were forgetting about budget concerns and shooting schedules. And for a magical moment, the set felt more like a party than the pressure cooker of a major Hollywood production. Then Tommy Lee Jones entered the tent like a storm cloud blocking out the sun. According to multiple witnesses, the laughter died as if someone had flipped a switch connected to everyone's vocal cords. Jones surveyed the scene with those penetrating eyes that seemed to catalog every detail, focusing particularly on Carrey, who was in the middle of what witnesses described as an absolutely hilarious impression of Batman himself, complete with the gravelly voice and cape-swishing motions. What happened next depends on who you ask, but the most widely reported version has Jones approaching Carrey directly, his boots clicking on the concrete floor like a countdown timer, and saying in a voice that could have frozen hellfire, "Some of us are here to work, Mr. Carrey. Some of us take this seriously. Some of us understand that making movies is a professional endeavor, not a playground for overgrown children." Carrey's response was to double down with what one witness called an epic, impromptu performance that transformed him into a dozen different characters in rapid succession, each one more outrageous than the last. It was comedy gold, the kind of spontaneous brilliance that had made him a household name, and it had everyone laughing. Everyone except Tommy Lee Jones, who simply stared with the intensity of a laser beam until the laughter died again like air being sucked out of a room. Then he walked away without taking any food, leaving behind a craft services tent that felt like a funeral parlor. The message was clear. This wasn't just about different acting styles anymore. This was personal, and it was war. Incident number 4. The director's dilemma. What most people don't know about the Batman Forever production is how the feud between Jones and Carrey put director Joel Schumacher in an impossible position that nearly drove him to quit the project entirely. Schumacher found himself caught between two massive egos and two completely incompatible approaches to filmmaking, like a referee in a boxing match where both fighters are using different rules. The incident that reportedly made Schumacher consider walking away happened during the filming of a crucial scene where Two-Face and the Riddler were supposed to work together to capture Batman. On paper, it should have been spectacular. Two of Hollywood's most talented actors bringing their A-game to create movie magic. In reality, it was a disaster of epic proportions that had crew members placing bets on who would crack first. Jones had prepared extensively for the scene, working with Schumacher for hours to understand Two-Face's motivation, his psychology, his place in the larger narrative. This was craft at its finest, an actor disappearing completely into his character's fractured psyche, bringing decades of training and experience to bear on every line, every gesture, every moment. But Carrey had other ideas that involved treating the script like a suggestion rather than a blueprint. Between takes, he reportedly began improvising, adding physical comedy bits that weren't in the script, making faces at the camera when he thought no one was looking, and generally treating the scene like an extended Saturday Night Live sketch where anything could happen. When Schumacher called cut after one particularly chaotic take where Carrey had allegedly ad-libbed his way through half the dialogue, Jones reportedly had reached his absolute limit. Witnesses say he approached the director with the measured pace of a man walking to an execution and, in a voice loud enough for everyone on set to hear, said, "Joel, I need to know something, and I need to know it right now. Are we making a serious film about complex characters struggling with the duality of human nature? Or are we making a Jim Carrey movie where nothing matters except getting the next laugh?" The set fell silent like someone had activated an EMP device. Carrey, still in his green Riddler costume and makeup, allegedly tried to lighten the mood with what witnesses described as his most brilliant improvisation yet. But Jones cut him off with a look that could have stopped traffic on the freeway. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Jones reportedly continued, his Texas drawl cutting through the silence like a blade. "Everything becomes about him. Every scene, every moment, every breath of air on this set, it all has to be about Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey, regardless of what the story needs or what the other actors are trying to accomplish." The confrontation ended with Jones walking off set, leaving behind a crew that didn't know whether to applaud or dive for cover. Carrey, for perhaps the first time in his career, was speechless, standing in his ridiculous green costume like a deflated balloon. Schumacher reportedly spent the next 3 hours in his trailer, seriously considering whether the movie could be salvaged or if it was doomed to become a cautionary tale about the dangers of miscasting. Incident number 5. The Wrap Party Freeze-Out. Even after filming Wrapped, the animosity lingered like smoke after a 5-alarm fire, proving that some Hollywood feuds transcend the projects that create them. The Batman Forever Wrap Party should have been a celebration, the cast and crew coming together to commemorate months of hard work, creative collaboration, and the successful completion of what everyone hoped would be a massive blockbuster. Instead, it became the scene of the most public and embarrassing display of their mutual dislike, a Hollywood social disaster that had party guests feeling like they were witnessing a car crash in slow motion. According to party attendees, the Beverly Hills venue might as well have been divided by the Berlin Wall. Tommy Lee Jones spent the entire evening on one side of the room, surrounded by crew members and character actors who appreciated his old-school professionalism, while Jim Carrey held court on the other side, entertaining a crowd of younger actors and studio executives who couldn't get enough of his manic energy. Neither acknowledged the other's presence, and when well-meaning colleagues tried to bring them together for photos or conversations, both men found sudden reasons to be elsewhere. Jones would remember an urgent phone call, while Carrey would spot someone across the room who simply had to meet his latest impression. The most telling moment came when director Joel Schumacher tried to give a speech thanking both men for their contributions to the film. Reportedly, Jones listened politely, his face a mask of professional courtesy, until Schumacher began praising Carrey's spontaneous energy, fearless commitment to character, and ability to find humor in the darkest moments. At that point, witnesses say, Jones simply set down his drink with the precision of a man setting down a loaded weapon, straightened his jacket, and left the party without a word to anyone. Jim Carrey, for his part, allegedly spent the rest of the evening doing impressions of serious actors, though careful observers noted he never specifically mimicked Tommy Lee Jones. Even in what appeared to be victory, it seemed, he understood that some lines shouldn't be crossed, some wounds were too deep to poke at safely. But the most devastating detail from that rap party came from a studio executive who witnessed the entire evening unfold like a Shakespearean tragedy. According to this source, the real tragedy wasn't the public nature of their conflict. It was watching two genuinely talented artists who could have learned from each other instead choosing to see only what they feared and hated about their own insecurities. But who was this Jim Carrey character that had gotten so deeply under Tommy Lee Jones's skin? To understand the full scope of their conflict and why it cut so deep, you need to know exactly what Jones was up against, and why Carrey represented everything he'd spent his career trying to rise above. Who was Jim Carrey? James Eugene Carrey burst into the world on January 17, 1962 in Newmarket, Ontario, armed with nothing but an irrepressible need to make people laugh and a face made of rubber that seemed designed by cosmic forces specifically for comedy. While Tommy Lee Jones was learning discipline and restraint in the oil fields of Texas, young Jim was discovering that being the class clown could transform pain into joy, poverty into possibility, and childhood trauma into comedic gold. His childhood was marked by financial struggle that would have broken lesser spirits and sent them running for the safety of conventional careers. When Jim was 12, his family lost their home and moved into a cramped Volkswagen van, eventually living in a tent on his older sister's lawn like refugees from the American dream. But instead of crushing his spirit or turning him bitter, hardship became his fuel, his raw material, his university education in the school of hard knocks. Here's what makes Carrey's story so remarkable. Comedy wasn't just entertainment for him, it was survival, pure and simple. Every joke was a defense mechanism, every impression a way to deflect attention from the harsh realities of a family teetering on the edge of complete collapse. While other kids were worried about homework and dating, Jim was performing stand-up comedy in Toronto clubs by age 15, honing the manic energy and physical elasticity that would eventually make him the highest-paid comedian in Hollywood history. But unlike Jones's methodical approach to craft, Carrey was pure instinct, a force of nature who could turn his face into a cartoon and his body into a physical punchline without seeming to think about it. This wasn't learned behavior, this was genetic, cellular, the kind of natural gift that comes along maybe once in a generation. The path to Batman Forever was paved with breakthrough performances that established Carrey as comedy royalty and redefined what it meant to be a movie star in the 1990s. Ace Ventura proved he could carry a movie on pure charisma. The Mask showcased his ability to blend physical comedy with genuine pathos, and Dumb and Dumber cemented his reputation as the funniest man alive. Each film showcased an actor who didn't just play characters. He became them through total physical and emotional commitment that was, in its own way, every bit as intense and demanding as anything Tommy Lee Jones had ever done. The difference was in the packaging. Where Jones wrapped his intensity in serious dramatic moments, Carrey exploded across every frame like a comedy supernova. But here's what Jones allegedly couldn't see, and what made their conflict so tragically unnecessary. Beneath Carrey's rubber-faced exterior was an artist every bit as committed to his craft, just expressing it through laughter instead of gravitas. Carrey's method wasn't chaos, it was controlled chaos, requiring the same dedication, preparation, and emotional honesty that Jones brought to his dramatic roles. The tragedy of their feud was that both men were, fundamentally, perfectionists who'd simply chosen different languages to speak their art. One chose tears, the other chose laughter, but both were trying to touch something true and human in their audiences. What Jones may never have understood was that Carrey's approach to comedy required just as much courage as dramatic acting, maybe more. It takes massive balls to stand in front of millions of people and try to make them laugh, knowing that humor is subjective, timing is everything, and failure is public and humiliating. But by 1995, Carrey was at the absolute peak of his powers, commanding $20 million per picture, and drawing audiences to theaters just to see what impossible thing he'd do next. He wasn't just a comedian. He was a phenomenon, a cultural force that had changed the landscape of American entertainment. That was the Jim Carrey that Tommy Lee Jones encountered on the set of Batman Forever. Not just a successful actor, but a revolution in motion, a complete redefinition of what movies could be and do. And for a man who'd spent decades perfecting a traditional approach to acting, that revolution probably felt like an invasion. Years later, both men would reflect on their Batman Forever experience with something approaching perspective, though neither would fully retreat from their original positions or offer the kind of Hollywood reconciliation that makes for easy magazine stories. Carrey would go on to prove his dramatic chops in films like The Truman Show and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, earning critical acclaim that validated his artistic ambitions beyond comedy. Jones, meanwhile, continued to balance blockbuster entertainment with serious character work, proving that it was possible to maintain artistic integrity while cashing studio paychecks. Both men's careers flourished in the decades that followed, suggesting that maybe their conflict was more about timing and circumstances than fundamental incompatibility. The feud became legendary in Hollywood circles, a cautionary tale that gets whispered about whenever producers consider pairing actors with dramatically different styles. Industry veterans still debate who was right, the disciplined traditionalist who demanded respect for the craft, or the innovative comedian who brought joy to millions through his fearless commitment to character. Perhaps the real lesson is that there's room in Hollywood for both approaches, that serious doesn't always mean somber, and that respect can be earned in many different ways. The craft of acting is vast enough to encompass both Tommy Lee Jones's laser-focused intensity and Jim Carrey's boundless creative energy, and the movie industry is big enough for multiple definitions of artistic success. But some grudges run too deep for easy reconciliation, carved into the soul by fundamental differences in worldview and artistic philosophy. In an industry built on collaboration, their conflict serves as a reminder that personality clashes can derail even the most promising partnerships, turning what should be creative collaboration into professional warfare that benefits no one. The Batman franchise moved on, both actors continued their careers and found new successes, but the echoes of their conflict still reverberate through Hollywood today. Every time a serious dramatic actor is paired with a comedy star, every time method meets madness on a movie set, people remember the summer when Two-Face and the Riddler couldn't stand each other and nearly destroyed a $250 million movie in the process. And maybe that's fitting. After all, some stories are too dramatic for Hollywood to forget, too human and messy to be easily resolved with studio publicity and forced smiles at premieres. The real tragedy isn't that they never reconciled. It's that they never got the chance to discover what they might have learned from each other, what kind of magic they might have created if pride and prejudice hadn't gotten in the way of artistic collaboration. But that's Hollywood for you. A place where dreams come true and egos go to die, sometimes in the same afternoon. So who was right in this legendary clash of acting philosophies that nearly destroyed one of the biggest movies of the 1990s? Was Tommy Lee Jones justified in demanding respect for serious craft and professional standards? Or was Jim Carrey simply bringing his own brand of artistic commitment to the role in a way that deserved recognition rather than ridicule? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, Team Tommy or Team Jim. And while you're thinking about it, we've got another explosive Hollywood feud dropping tomorrow that'll make this one look like a friendly disagreement at a church social. You won't want to miss it, so make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. What other legendary Hollywood conflicts should we explore next? Should we dive into the Russell Crowe incidents that left co-stars traumatized? The Marlon Brando behavior that made directors question their career choices? Let us know, and we'll dig into the behind-the-scenes drama that shaped the movies you love and the stars you thought you knew.